Good evening. So, tonight's challenge is to fix up our user IDs, where throughout the application at the moment we've just been using a callback with a blank user ID, and that will end up being used by a cross-cutting concern in our aggregate here. Now, I've been trying to work out the best way to get a user ID from the API. We've got a basic choice of grabbing it from middleware or doing something like where's the controller gone? Getting the header from the request in here, so finding some kind of authentication header here of who the user is. We also want to facilitate anonymous querying, which means that not all of our endpoints need to have authentication. It's only the ones that are actually going to be doing the writing. Now, I'm not sure if this means that I want to use a middleware or not. I'm thinking a middleware would be a good idea, because as mentioned in the README file, I want to be able to delegate the authentication out to an identity server instance. Now, I'm not quite sure how we do this in .NET Core. I've used Identity Server a number of times in .NET 4.5 projects, but I've never used it in .NET Core, so I've been having a quick look through to see how this would be done. Let's have a look at the samples. I'm hoping it's just a case of a middleware that does something, and then we can have a fake middleware for getting user IDs from people who aren't, if we're not using Identity Server. Let's see. Quick start seems like a good place to start. aspnet identity. Let's have a look. And probably startup's a good place to start. Right, configure services, database, add identity. Add entity framework stores, and a token provider. And then we have identity server itself running. Now, we don't want to run identity server ourselves, so I'm suspecting this is all we'll need, but we'll need something to fake in what happens here. And at some point a configuration system so that someone can point out the URL they wish to talk to identity server on. This also raised an interesting issue when I was looking at the feature toggling and user IDs, is that our toggles at the moment can only be active or inactive. There's no kind of canary functionality, so you can't say, given this type of user or this subset of users, this toggle is on, for everyone else it is off. Which means, rather than having an active flag, we need to have something along the lines of maybe a hash set or a dictionary of user IDs and whether they're active, or more likely a method that you can query to say, is this active for a given user? Because then we can hide the details of how a user is classified inside the aggregate itself. Changing to use that system is a fairly easy refactoring, in that we can still support our toggle switched on and toggle switched off events, but we're going to change them up a bit. And as we're pre 1.0, we don't need to worry about back compatibility of our changes. We can just make the changes and see what happens. Right. So toggle switching on and off. It all really comes down to how we're identifying users and groups of users, which means we can't necessarily just say for the current user ID, for instance, get current user ID, because we might not want to do that for a current user. We might want to say switch it off for, I don't know, administrators, who are from, I don't know, England. Like, that might be a small group of your users. So I don't really know what I want to do around that yet. So I'm going to ignore it for now and go back to fiddling with identification. So this add identity method, I guess, comes from identity server. We'll see if it's available for us. Oh, and also let's switch back into presentation mode so that things are a bit easier to see. There we go. Let's hide that. Okay, that didn't quite work. Right, add identity. Now, this identity was an application user and an identity role. Not sure what these are, so see what we get for IntelliType on this. Nothing. Great. Just get some slight editor crashes instead. Add ident. And no IntelliType at all, apparently. Well, that's useful. Let's try switching file and switching back in. Nope, nothing. No idea what's going on there. Right. Add identity, and that had some kind of type parameters and that. So if we maybe go to definition, user and role, which is importable from two different places. Def that one. Right. The type representing a user and the type representing a role. Well, that makes sense, I guess. So let's have I don't know, Crispin user and a Crispin role, and we'll just create some blank types for those. And there was an overload for this that had some options. Let's see what we can do with those. Oh, not like that. Options, password system, sign in, tokens, user. Well, let's see, identity servers example. Add framework stores. No, not going to do that. Add default token providers. Does that follow on to the end of this? What does that even return? Some kind of identity builder. I guess that makes sense. Add default token providers. Oh, we have IntelliType back. Right, so we have some identity and some token providers, whatever those might do. Not going to bother with that. We've already got that. Not going to bother with those. And I'm going to try and ignore that as well. We have a use identity and a use identity server call, so let's, and that's above MBC, so app.useIdentity. This method is obsolete. Alternative, use authentication. Well, that makes sense, I guess. Now this is what we're probably going to be after. Some kind of external authentication, which will be our external identity server. And then they've got some roots. Now the annoying thing is I can't debug any of this. Unless do I even have Visual Studio installed? Oh, I do. Alright, so we might have to use Visual Studio for part of this at least, just so that I can at least debug what is going on, because I have no idea what this is actually going to expose. So I'm going to go back through this example and see if there's a controller example that I can nick some code off. An account controller. That sounds like it would involve someone authorized. Authorized and security headers. Now we have a user manager here. Not sure if that's built-in type or not. Could be. Could also be identity server based. Right. So we might be able to authorize the whole controller and mark just an individual method as allowing anonymous. Let's find one that's not allowed to be anonymous. Wow, everything can be allowed anonymous. No, literally everything is allowed anonymous. Why not just make the whole controller allow anonymous then? And we've got some sign-in manager. User. I would imagine that's an identity server thing, or an inbuilt type for this project. Go back up here. Identity server interaction service. That might be useful for us later. Well, let's see if we have user manager available to us. Let's go to our toggle controller. In fact, let's just see if this application runs as it is. I mean, we could query it yesterday, so. And we'll use writer's inbuilt test rest feature. And good, we're just going to do a get to localhost. Yep, blank. And if we do a post, and hopefully this has remembered my text. Nope. Oh well, just write our model again. Name is test. Description is desk, because that's a good description. Application JSON text, yeah, post. Right, and we should have got a tour one created and a URL back. Right, so at least we haven't broken anything by adding in identity. But we have no idea what we're actually identifying. So let's go to the toggle controller. Now, what did this example do? Oh yes, we had a user manager. So let's see if that's a type available to us. It is. So user manager, if it was a Crispin user, users, and let's just initialize a field for that. It's users. What I want to know is who the current user is and how it works. No real idea what I'm doing, which might be evident. Right, let's have a look. aspnetcore identity. Introduction. That's probably what we want rather than just going straight into complicatedness. Right, we've done that bit. Not that. We've ignored that bit. We've done that. Configure. We're not setting up password requirements or lock settings, cookie settings. And I'm going to ignore that as well. Right. We've done use identity. Options using memory. No, I'm not going to do that either. Right, so we can create a user with that. We can sign in with that. The thing is, I don't really want... Oh, I suppose I do want sign in. Really just want an identifier that each client has to pass in. Just so we can say who was doing the querying, but I guess that is kind of sign in. And that does log out. That's nice. This sign in manager, sign out async. What is the result? User, did they succeed to sign in? Right, I think we need a management controller to start with. Just so we've got somewhere that we can actually sign up users and then do logins and such. So let's create a directory. Management. Toggles. Management, yeah. And that is going to have a management controller in it, which is going to be a controller class, and we're going to have a public void post. This is going to have a root of management. Oh no, it's not going to have a root of anything because that's the name of the controller, I think. Can't remember. This is going to have a root though of management create. Yeah, let's have a create. No users. Great. We might have other management things later. Now we also have a model for this from body create user model. That will have some properties on it at some point. Probably public string user name, and also a public string password. Now, this used the user manager. They carefully don't show you where that comes from, but I'm going to assume it was the same as the identity server example. So we had a user manager of Crispin users. And let's field for that, and in here users.create. Yep, that exists. New Crispin user, username equals username. What did they put in theirs? The password went on here, okay. So let's extract that out into a variable var user. Await create user async user model dot password. And then if result no suggestions, right? What type is result? It doesn't know. Great. A task of something. Let's go and see. Go to definition instead. Identity result. And an identity result, I would imagine, has the succeeded flag on it. And do we care about anything else? No, we need to be able to do a sign in for them as well. So if result.succeeded, wait, sign in manager, sign in async. Right, I have no idea what a sign in manager is. Sign in manager of Crispin user, I guess. Sign in manager dot sign in async. What does that take? The user and persistency. The user. Well, this one does not seem to take persistency. Maybe it does. For more information how to enable confirmation and password reset, go to this. No, I don't care at the moment. And then this does a redirect. But we're not going to redirect. But we are going to return OK. So this needs to be an iAction result. Otherwise we're going to return, I don't know, bad request. Crispin user does not. No, it doesn't. I thought I hit hold enter on that, but clearly not. Right, now it contains a definition. So if we run this and go back to the REST tool, we've now got to go to, what was it? Management, users, create. And we're going to post a model that doesn't look like that. It instead looks like username. That's interesting. Username is test1. Oh, and a password. Password is ABC. So that did not go to the right controller. Ah, it wouldn't do. HTTP post. Rerun. And try again. That's not the response I'm expecting. But according to this, we are actually hitting the right thing. Management users create. Although we can't tell what route it's taking. Let's go and have a look at the toggles controller. Ah. I do actually need to put the name of the controller in there. Which means, for the time being, I can do that. I think. Yes, I can. And I get an exception. Right. Unable to resolve service type user store. Yes, that's because we deliberately didn't configure one. So let's configure one. Add user store. Can I do this? Have a look at the definition of that. No, it wants an actual implementation. Right. Where tuser is a class. An iUser store. Okay. Let's create a user store then. Public class Crispin user store, which is an iStore of Crispin users. Oof. And that was me hoping for a nice simple API. I wonder if there's some inbuilt in memory version. As much fun as that'll be to implement. The iUser store. I don't want an entity framework version. I'm sure I read something about in-memory. I don't want an in-memory database, to be honest. I just want an in-memory store. Memory user store. Well, that sounds about right. Okay. Oh, so you don't need to implement most of the methods. Right. In the interest of not being bothered to type this, and in the hope that I will delete this fairly shortly, back to the copy and paste design pattern. And we've not got an identity user, we have a Crispin user. And ours only have have usernames, so that's all we're going to query on. Oh, I don't have a hashed password. Well, let's create it. Which namespace does crypto come from, though? Well, let's not. What are you missing? Everything? That seems unlikely. Let's get rid of that bit. Everything is not implemented. Okay. What does he expect me to be returning? Create async Crispin user cancellation token. Ah, everything is supposed to have a cancellation token. I wonder if that's the difference between .NET Core and hold on. That can go away. Yeah, it's basically all the same except everything's got a cancellation token after it. Right, let's see if that's enough to get rid of the build errors. Or for my mouse to go mental, one of the two. Given you a cancellation token, what are we talking about? Throwing cancellation token. That's a task. Ah, a task of something. No, just as a task. Alright, we'll just do it ourselves. Alright, let's not throw that. What do you mean nothing's into... It's a... What? Is this just Ryder being stupid? Doesn't implement user store. Crispin user, create user cancellation token. Create user cancellation. It does, it's right there. Because it does not have the right return type. Task identity result. And yet this was all auto-generated. That's useful. No options on that. That's incredibly not useful. And why has it put all these in? And those. I wonder... I wonder if that's why it was, because there's some weird imports. Nope. Identity result. I wonder if they're all identity result. No. That's annoying. Right. Is there no other way of dealing with that? I suppose we could use something like nsubstitute and just create a fake one. Or I can just implement one properly, I suppose. Let's just create a new class for it. Maybe it's just being weirded out by other things. In memory user store, which had to be an I user storage of Crispin user. Useless piece of crap. Don't generate code if you're not going to do it properly. See, half these are task of string. Let's just cheat. With that, import the missing references, replace tuser with Crispin user, and replace all semicolons with open close brackets. Fix that. Oh, maybe not all semicolons, just most of them. That, and that. Right. Now what's your problem? Oh, piss off. Oh, they probably need to be public, I guess. Let's do this. Public task, open bracket. Well, only 2 that are wrong now, at least. Or 3, I can't count. Does not implement iDisposable. Okay, that's easy enough. Public void dispose does nothing. Go to format document. Now we need to throw some exceptions. Oh, actually, you know what we're going to do instead? Let's have underscore users equals new list of Crispin user. And we shall then just do anything that wants a user ID is just going to get users, is it task dot from result users first. Dot username. Get username, can have the same thing. Set username async. That's weird. Return task, or completed task. Get normalized username. That can just have the basic username as well. Set normalized username. Return task.completed. Create a user underscore users dot add user. Return identity results dot success. Task dot from results. Update async. You know what? I'm not going to do anything on that. Delete is not going to do anything. Find by ID is just going to return the first one. And find by name is also going to return the first one. Right, if that guy had a hacky implementation, I've really got a hacky implementation. Does not implement set normalized username async. I'm pretty sure I saw that. Get normalized username async. Set normalized username async. Can open because it is not public. Oh, okay. Is there any other missing ones that are public? Yep, that one. Right. Now we can finally do in memory store. What did I call it? In memory user store. Good. Right. Now with luck we'll actually be able to run the thing and see what happens. Control F5, yes, stop and rerun. And let's go back to the REST service tester. And I fixed the name of that, so I need to do that. Let's clear that buffer and try posting. And another exception. Unable to resolve service type. Role store. Oh, don't be like this. I don't want to have to implement another one. Where's my user store? Let's see, I mean it's still covered in red even though it compiled successfully. Public class in memory role store. Role store. Crispin role. Beginning to think adding a reference to identity server would have been the easier thing to do. I don't want to do this again. Maybe it'll import everything properly this time. Nope, not a hope. Where's that identity server one gone? What did they do? It might well just be easier to use identity server to start with. We can worry about externalizing it later. Be less painful than apparently trying to implement an interface in Rider. do that for now. As I don't want to chuck all this away, because, you know, it was quite painful to write, let's check out a new branch, which will be aspnet auth, and do git save, which commits everything with a horrible message of save point, git checkout master, and if we switch back to this, that all disappears. Let's go into here and see what packages we need to install. Quite a lot from the look of it. Identity server 4 and identity server 4 aspnet identity. Let's do that. That's a search box, not a portal. Right, and let's put that into the REST project. Of course, this is probably now downloading half the internet. Once that's done, we can then install identity as well. Yep, let's have the aspnet identity as well. Ooh. That is literally installing half the internet. And repeatedly telling me the .NET Core is not quite supported. What am I making? A horrible mess from the look of it. It's meant to be a feature toggling service using event storing, event sourcing for the back end, and a RESTful API on the front. At the moment, I'm attempting to do some kind of authorization and just irritating myself, really. There's a fuller description as well on the GitHub repository that goes along with this, which should be in the channel description on Twitch somewhere. Right, let's see what's happened. Let's have a look at the project. Yep, okay. So, startup. Let's go back to this identity server startup, because now we want to use basically all of this. Basically all of that. I wonder if there's a maybe there's an in-memory implementation on this one. So okay, we'll use that type. Oh, what did that do? I wanted to generate some types, not import things. Oh, stop it! No, it's called Crispin. There should be. I thought there was a link to it in there. So it's github.com/ponderdom/Crispin. I don't know what that is. Let's remove that. I don't want to use something like that. Maybe that will just work. And let's do that, which is the identity server implementation. We'll come back to what those are in a minute. Use browsing. No. yes. I have a headache already. Ah, yes, this was use authentication, wasn't it? We're not going to bother with that or that. Right, now we need to figure out what this config was. So we've got some resources, an API resource. What are we using? Get identity resources. That's these. Let's just paste those on the bottom for now. Just want something that works really. I don't care what it does at the moment. We can refactor it to be what we want later. And then we've got clients. I don't know which one of those I want, so I'll just take the lot. It's weird because I don't really want clients at all in this. I just want users. Well, that'll do for now. Right, get API resources. What is that? Okay. And now, actually, I want that management controller. I have a feeling this isn't going to work either because it's going to want an in-memory store as well. Maybe there is a package for it. We have entity framework, MongoDB, tests, compatibility, and multi-tenancy. And no one has just an in-memory implementation that works. Well, that's annoying. Well, let's use Git Kraken and just grab the contents of my management controller because I don't want to have to type it again. While that's loading, I shall create my directory again. And the controller class itself, users controller. And there's our management controller. So we definitely want that. That I think was an application user. So just replace those. And create some properties on it. And it probably would help if I inherited controller as well. And gave it the routing attribute, root management. Well, I suppose actually management / users, and then that's just users, create even. Although, I suppose technically you could just post to it, but... Right, let's see if this works. I suspect not. I suspect we'll still need that in-memory thing. Extra. Go back to our rest thing. Oh, now we actually get startup errors. What? Add authentication was not found. Oh, hang on, add authentication. I suspect something in one of these is not doing what it's supposed to. Startup line 40. Yep. Why do I get the sneaky suspicion that this doesn't support .NET 2? Identity server 4. It's for aspnetcore. Well, it mentions 1.1, not 2.0. Alright, let's see what happens if we search their issue list for missing method exception. Ah, there we are. One breaking change. Right, so Identity Server 4 2.0 Preview 2 works on .NET Core 2, but the Identity Package and Entity Framework packages aren't supported yet. Joy. You know, the other day I was saying that I didn't think that Core was quite ready for prime time yet. I stand by that. RM, RF, source, Crispin, rest. This is why I committed all those changes to a separate branch, which I can now go back to. Pnet auth. I thought I called it auth. Dash auth. Git. What am I doing? Git checkout master. Git merge. Aspnet auth. Git undo. Right, changes back into my working directory as if nothing had ever happened. Yeah, I'm hitting loads of 1.1 versus 2.0 issues as I go through this. Not least of all is Ryder shouting at me every time it does anything, and then random missing method exceptions. But I suspect I will need to do this role store as well, which is annoying, but you know what, I might cheat for this and see whether Visual Studio works. I don't think I've ever launched it. Let's clear that, because we got rid of that part. This still thinks that nothing is implemented, and Visual Studio is thinking. Grr. Come on. What's wrong with that? Oh, I guess I suppose that would be broken now. So we went into the toggles controller and we added a dependency which we're not using, so let's get rid of that while we wait. Visual Studio is still loading. Or possibly crashing. One of the two. Possibly both. Oh, I might even be able to debug this one, actually, with Visual Studio. If it ever loads. $135 warnings. Lovely. We've noticed the tool window error list is slowing down Visual Studio. Well, I guess. Can't find project info for this project. What the hell is going on? Build. This isn't running, is it? No, not running anything, so the DLL's unlocked. Oh well, I'm just going to implement a class using this anyway. I haven't actually tried VS Code out. I keep meaning to, but I tend to use Atom and Rider for most things. Although I'm using Visual Studio at work because we need local IIS instance integration rather than IIS Express, and Rider doesn't do local IIS integration. Public class, was it a role store or something? In memory role store. In memory role store. Role. Was it an iRoll store? Thought it was. Yeah, like I said, I do keep meaning to try it. A couple of the other guys at work use it. So, oh, let's just run this one. My laptop sounds like it's trying to take off now. Doesn't like running Visual Studio. Yeah, I gather you haven't hit the discard all changes bug that the guy on GitHub had. Exception is defined in an assembly that is not referenced. What? This is... We've not made any project changes. Actually, what's in that? ls source Crispin rest properties. Launch settings. Okay. Right. This all worked earlier. Yes, I think everyone has an experience with uncommitted source code like once in their life, and that the pain that causes it to only happen once in your life. But interestingly, you tend to write it better the second time anyway, because you've got all that domain knowledge in your head by that point. So the second time you write it, it flows a bit better, and you kind of fix some mistakes you make as you go along. I mean, not that it's a good thing to lose that much work, but Greg Young does a talk about domain modeling where he recommends a system where you take a group of developers into a room, and in a morning you brainstorm with a couple of domain experts. In the afternoon they write a domain model, check it with the expert, and then at the end of the night, or the end of the day, they delete all the code, and the next morning they do the same thing again. And you do that for 3 or 4 days, and by the end of the 4th day you actually have a domain model that works and has all of the right assumptions baked into it, because you've learned things and rewritten things better over the last 4 days. I'd love to give that a try, but yeah, value type is different. You know what? I'm just going to try closing Rider and reopening it. Maybe that'll help. Maybe that's why we couldn't generate everything properly, because nothing exists. No, don't save. The 4 days down from writing are going to save manual. Yes, that's the idea, that you have a fully functional domain model by the end of it, and knowing that it's going to be deleted and thrown away at the end of the day means that you're less attached to the mistakes you've already made. Right, 17th time's a charm. On the plus side, Rider loads quicker than Visual Studio. Maybe it will just work. That would be nice. And if this doesn't, I'm going to write off my losses for the time being, commit it to a spare branch, and then go and do something more interesting than fighting with identity, and have a read up and figure out what to do differently. While this is loading, I might actually have that talk of Greg's bookmarked. Awesome talks. It might be this Skills Matter mystery talk. Let's see, Twitch. Still loading. Yeah, that link I pasted I think is that talk about domain-driven design. If not, it's a very good talk anyway, otherwise I wouldn't have saved it in my awesome talks list. Right, let's run this. Tools, REST Web Service Tester. Do that. Get an error. Right. Unable to resolve type. iRoll store. Yes, annoying. So let's implement an iRoll store. let's just implement it in its own file. So I think I'm going to have to do it with with find and replace again in memory role store. And this is a role store of Crispin role. So in memory, nope, I role store Crispin role. Yep, all wrong. So let's go to definition of that, and I'll copy the interface again. Add the missing imports, replace T-role with Crispin role. Replace all of close bracket semicolon with close bracket braces. Let's do format document. Oh, and let's go to presentation mode again. How is Rider so far? It has rough edges, but it's still not technically 1.0'd yet, so I expect that a bit. Apart from like this fighting with it implementing an interface, I find it pretty good. It's definitely faster than Visual Studio, and presentation mode when streaming is great, and it's not bad when doing presentations as well, but it's usually streaming that I'm using with. Yeah, it lacks a few things from Visual Studio that I miss. Mostly from my day job perspective, is local IIS server integration. So I miss that because we use that a lot. But apart from that, yeah, apart from IIS and lacking IIS. Oh, and also running an IIS Express project, it binds to whatever port it wants to. It ignores the setting in your project file of what port you want it to start on, which is annoying. But apart from those two things, yeah, I like it a lot. To the point where I've actually bought the license for my personal use rather than using the betas now. So as in the other one, we're going to do a list of roles, and we're just going to return the first of everything to anything that wants one. Sometimes IntelliType seems to break in presentation mode as well, which is a bit weird. Right, this wants an identity result and is creating a user, so we'll do roles.add role return task.from results identity results.success. Yep, good. We'll just take that. Update's not going to do anything. Delete is going to do nothing. Get a role, get role, get role. Set is going to do nothing. Oh, that's just task completed task, isn't it? Yeah. Return task.completed task. Set's going to do nothing. And that's going to return task.from result. Find by name roles first. Right, that can get the first item back. Get normalized name, so that can take the first item and just return the name, which needs to be a property. That needs the name as well, and that can return the name. Oh look, it's apparently missing everything. Don't lie to me. I'm beginning to think it might be that there's a package reference missing. Like there's an indirect reference to the right package. But Ryder's not able to pick something up. Maybe. I don't know. Right, doesn't implement disposable. Okay, that's easy enough. Public void dispose. Can do nothing. Oh, not with those kind of brackets it can't. Oh, and then everything else needs to be public. So we'll just do that. And try that, and then while that's going, we can go into the startup and register our role store. Add role store in memory. Role store. Oh, it built. I mean, it built. Obviously, I expected it to build. I don't care about warnings. Not at the moment, anyway. Right, let's try running that and see what happens. If it even just starts up, that would be nice. Oh, it's started, so that's progress. Right, management users create. I did recreate the management controller, didn't I? Yes. Management users create. And we're going to give it a model that's just got a username of test and a password of ABC. Post. Oh, different error. Stack traces are so big once tasks get involved. Store does not implement I use a password store. No, it doesn't. Should it do? Apparently. The question is, what extra does this need to implement? Oh, it's only 3 methods. See, this is where they should have strong typed the setup method, because you could have verified this with a compiler rather than waiting for a runtime error. That, and that. Replace that with that. And there. And there. Right. Set password hash. Well, that's going to do nothing. Return task.completed. Get password hash. I could, or I could just return password. Not that we've got a password property, but we can have one. Oh, we do have one. Well, that'll do. Has password async. Indicates whether the user has one. That's okay. Return string dot is null or white space equals false. Good. Oh, yeah, it's running. Yes, stop and rerun. Right. Back to the web service tester. I wonder what error we'll get this time. Let's just clear out this log so I can just go straight to the top when we get the error. Or not. sequence contains no elements. It probably doesn't. User store, line 29. What? Oh. First or default. This is a really bad way of doing it. Unnecessary allocations, but it's the quickest way of getting this working. And try again. Ooh. I got a bad request. Password is too short. Ooh. That means we're getting somewhere. Right. Now somewhere there was a setup of identification that let me have an overload. Was it that? Yep. So, password require length 0. x.password.require digit equals false. x.password.require unique characters, require lowercase. False and false. Basically switch off all password validation. Alright, that might be enough. Require non-alphanumeric equals false. Oh, we're back to an error now. That means we've gone further and are trying to hit my really bad in-memory store, I imagine. Yep. Get username async. Memory store line 40. Now we don't want a null reference exception, so I'm just going to make sure we never have a null value here. New, not Newtonsoft, new user. Like I said, this is really not the way you should implement it, but my goodness, I wish they shipped with an in-memory store by default. I don't want to take a dependency on entity framework. Ooh, did that work? No, 400. Invalid username. For some reason. Okay, what options are there on usernames? if it requires an email. Let's go back to the identity server page and see what we had on that. Oh, I shut it. No, clearly not a closed tab. Alright. aspnet core identity server. Where is that samples repository gone? It wasn't this one. I'm sure one of the things I was looking at had a list of things that they'd switched off. Lockout, cookie settings, user settings, require unique email. That's how they create one. Let's go back to our manager controller then. Invalid username. What was that username? Did I specify a username in here? I did. Okay, test at example.com. Try that. Nope. Invalid username. Well, thank you for that, and I can't debug it, so I have no idea what the actual error is. Well, let's try and rule out what the model has in it by doing this. Username equals test at home.com. Password is ABC. Nope, invalid username. Right, so that indicates that something, when we hit our in-memory store, is not working. Do we have our create user? Users add. Crispin user. So we're definitely adding a user, assuming that's not null. And then get user ID. Should work because there will now be something in there. Get username. Yeah. And when the collection's empty, we do nothing, I guess. The user whose name should be retrieved. I wonder if that's what's causing it. It's an invalid username and we're returning something when we should be returning null, I guess. So the implementation is not helpful, so instead I'm just going to return null always. We'll see what happens with that. While I wait on that other guy with the dodgy implementation. What did he do? Oh, that's basically a different interface. Okay, not much help then. We get exceptions instead. Null reference exception. Get username. I wonder if it's creating a new instance of this every single time. Let's do something about that, possibly, by instead doing static read-only list equals new. This is really hacky now. I'm not happy about this. Invalid username. What is invalid about it? Well, I can't debug it, because Rider won't debug a .NET Core 2 app. At least it didn't last time I tried. Maybe it works this time. Debug. Nope, nothing. So, not only is all my code apparently invalid, it doesn't work, I can't debug it, and I don't really know what to do about it. It is properly hacky. I'm tempted just to shelve it all off and do something else instead. I'll worry about this later. Possibly until Identity Server supports .NET Core 2. Huh. Might be able to get away with doing that. Maybe. And I want to use that. Maybe I should just drop my application down to aspcore 1. That would definitely be easier. I'm going to shelve this off. Check out branch aspnet-auth2. Go back to master, and all of that horrible code disappears. So instead, let's talk about users and such in the abstract, because clearly I can't get it to work with .NET yet. So the basic problem is this active flag depends on who is doing the querying, because an anonymous user flag might be switched on, but for a logged in user it might be off, and for a different logged in user it might also be on. So we can't really have active as a status, but what we can do is refactor this. So we'll get rid of active like that, and instead have a public method called public bool is active, for which you'll pass in a string user ID. Now, to keep our existing implementation working, we can just do, and that's interesting, we're going to break a lot of event, well, these are going to have to change anyway. Yeah, these are all going to need to change, so we can just do private bool is active, and do that, and that. So we now have basically the same as we did before, except we now have the ability to pass in the user ID. So if we build this, we should get some compile errors because we've now lost the active property and replaced it with an is active. Quite a few errors. Right, so is active, and we can pass any string in here at the moment because we're not doing anything specific with the information yet. Right, to do this, h, replace with that, replace, yep. And then we can start to work out what we want to do with our toggling. So the fact that a toggle gets switched on and off doesn't really exist. A toggle can be switched off for a particular user or a particular class of users. We somehow need to represent that. So this, yep, so toggle replace active property with is active method. Now somehow we need to actually represent a toggle being changed for a particular user state. So I think we need to be able to specify whether it's a user or a role, because I mean we're going to be using users and roles in the concept of our API anyway. So if we say it's off for a given role and then query it by user, we also need to be able to say whether the user is in a specific role. This makes it a much more interesting problem, at least. So at some point in here we now need to be able to say, given a user ID, is the flag on or off for the user specifically, which is easy enough. We can store that as some kind of hash set in the background because we can get the user ID from this. But we also need to be able to say, is the flag on or off for a role the user is a member of? And that's where things start to get more interesting, which means we might end up passing in some kind of iRoll service, and probably the user ID. We can now say something like, so assuming we had our hash set, we would say we'd say an individual's activeness, or that's an interesting point. We now need to be able to store whether they're on or off for a specific user. Because if a user's in part of a role that's got a toggle switched on, but they've also got a state saying this toggle is off for this user, which one takes precedent? Maybe this shouldn't be as part of the toggle domain, or the toggle aggregate. The aggregate itself can just deal with the fact that there is a toggle, it's called this, these are its properties. Whether something is active or not, that's based on something else. That actually sounds like a better idea. Let's undo this. And we'll go in here and just create a class. We'll say this is our toggle state map. Why is naming things so hard? Control panel. Lots of switches on a control panel. Yeah, let's call it a control panel. So if we think about this from our usage case, we've got two sides of things. We've got querying toggles and we've got setting of toggles. So we're probably going to end up with something like switching off for everyone. So this is all for an individual toggle. You can switch it on for everyone. You can switch it off for a group. Oh, my typing, group. And you can switch it on for a group as well. And the same goes again for a user. Now the interesting part comes down to what happens if you have a toggle which is on for the group, off, no, let's say it's on for everyone, off for a group, and on for a user. What state is that toggle in? I guess the right answer is it depends. Because when let's say on for user 1, off for group 1. So when user 1 queries, they should get on. When user 2 queries, assuming user 2 is not in the group, they should get on. When user 3, who is in the group, they should get off. And basically an anonymous user is going to get whatever the state is for everyone. Now that's fairly hierarchical. I guess it becomes even more interesting if we've got overlapping groups. What happens if you have a toggle which is off for group 1, on for group 2, and user 4 is in group 1 and group 2. What state toggle do they get? And you need it to be deterministic in some way. You wouldn't want to query the toggle 2 times in a row and get a different answer each time. So I suppose we should say have a default of toggles tend to be off. So given a choice of off or on, if you have this scenario happening, they will be off. And you'd probably want to be able to control that. See, feature toggling seems like quite an easy domain until you start drilling into these problems, ignoring the fact that apparently setting up identity in aspnetcore 2 is difficult. So, let's write some methods. Let's start off. Let's make this an interface. So I don't have to implement the method bodies yet. I can just play around with what the signature is going to be. So we have a void switch on, which will take a toggle ID. That will be a type that I'll need to create in a minute. And we've got one version which is not got anything. This switch is on for everyone. Then we'll have void switch on, which will take in again a toggle ID. I'm going to actually call a parameter that as well. And it'll take in a group ID. And then we have the same thing again, but this time we get a user ID. So in fact we need to name our methods because of our types. So switch on for everyone, group, for user, and then effectively a single method which is bool is on or is active, which can take a toggle ID and the user ID. And now we actually have something we can implement. So effectively in our toggle here we would say I control panel, and then you'd say control return control is active ID user ID. The thing is, switching on and off toggles for people, that's an event stream that we want to keep a hold of. We want to keep track of that. But as we're also only affecting one toggle at a time, we could actually just put this on the class itself. And there's nothing stopping us having this idea of a control panel which actually does the logic, because this is going to become quite involved, I would imagine. But the actual switching on and switching off could be done here. It means effectively we lose this, but we can put the rest of the data in a parameter. So we could have something like a public class switch options, and that would take public string user, public string group. Let's get rid of the ID. So if you said switch options here, and then pass the options straight into the toggle, no more checking if they're active. And in the handler for switching on, which is here, rather than setting is active, we now say, we now need just to store like, let's see, on groups dot add if e dot group is not null, then our list of groups which is active for, we'd add to, and groups that it's inactive for, we'd remove. And likewise we'd say if e.user is not equal to null, user active add e.user, user inactive remove e.user. Now this in itself can probably be another class. We can wrap the logic up, but we actually need to store it in our aggregate, which now means our is active. Can remove that for the time being. And it becomes a case of so we're going to say that, oh, you and your underscores, I could put them into a different color if you want. So we can now either say that the presence of something in one of those lists gives it the most precedence. So if what we call users inactive contains the user ID, return false. If users active contains user ID, return true. And then we do the same again for the groups. Otherwise, false. At this point, although that is somewhat messy, I think it's a reasonable place to start, other than we don't know what groups the user is in, hence why we had that interface here, which I think we're going to need. But I don't know which way around to create it. So I'm going to delete the content, and I'm going to comment out the contents of this, and we're going to go refactoring everything. So that's close to what we want, but not right. And this is now. I think we'll leave the options passed in as a parameter. Ow! An electric shock off my laptop. That's worrying. Now there are my switch options. Debating bothering with the switch options and actually just doing this instead. String user equals null. String group equals null. And I'm going to probably replace these with some actual types at some point. Yeah, we'll do that. User group. Ow! Another electric shock. I don't like that. Apparently if I touch my radiator and my laptop at the same time I get an electric shock. Which worries me either about the laptop or the radiator. I'm not sure which. Is group really a keyword? Apparently not. Right, so we now need to update this. Turned on for group. User. Oh, and this is supposed to be a property. Encapsulate as a property. Right. Do that. Go to the bottom. Now here we need to actually do something with this user. So if we go back up to our constructor, I'm going to get rid of this isActive flag. And to start with, we will have users active equals new hash set of string with an ordinal ignore case comparer. And a hash set is like the key part of a dictionary. So it saves us just doing a dictionary of string object and then never setting the actual object. So we'll use 2 fields for this. We're just going to implement this one to start with. So if the group is, did we do groups or users? I can't remember. Users. So let's ignore groups for the time being. So that if user, could have sworn that we added a user property. No, it's called options. User. There we go. Right, if the user is not null, actually let's do string.null or white space. It'll be just our luck that someone passes in a bunch of blank spaces. Right. So say users active add and users inactive remove. We'll ignore that for the time being. This is going to break a lot of tests. Right, and we now actually need this part. Yeah, that should work. I mean, once it compiles. what we'll do with this once we've got the groups part is extract the idea of having two collections. Oh, could we? Could actually get away with using a dictionary, I think. A dictionary of string boolean. Yeah, maybe. Right. New tools. Right, so this now needs parameters. But null, null. In fact, as these are nullable, we'll do that. No, I don't need to do that. Somewhat surprised that all compiled. But I mean, the test should fail. not that we can run them, because Rider doesn't support .NET Core 2 tests. Luckily, I created a test file, or test script. This should have some failing tests. Yes, many. Right, that's a bit harder to read than inside Visual Studio, isn't it? When an aggregate is loaded, the expected false should be true, but was not. But what? We have a line number, that would have been useful. That's interesting. Why are that blowing up? In memory session tests. Line 69. Yeah, alright, that's not a decent test. We're going to remove that. That's fine. We can actually test that. We'll do one, user one, user one. Let's put that back because we can test it. So, toggle no is active for user one should be true. What's the in-memory session tests? toggle switching tests. Yes, I expected these to break. Now, the first thing we've got is that these are checking the switching on and on toggle does nothing. Do we want to keep that behavior, and how? I guess a call to isActive, I mean, we already have the user ID at that point. But we don't necessarily have their groups. I think we're going to end up emitting the event either way, because if we look at the actual toggle itself, here we have switch off and switch on. Now before we were checking if they were active. Switch on for a user and a group. Actually, we'll have all the requisite data, other than what groups the user is a member of. Yeah, I think we're just going to end up emitting the event, which means that our off to off test is no longer, and our on to on test is no longer as well. Now our switch on needs a user ID, so user 1, so that when queried should work. I'm going to expect switching off to still fail because I've not done anything about that yet. We don't need to change that test. So to implement switching off, we have basically the same structure. Let's do this. That's the constructor switch to off group user. Now our switched on works like that, but our switch off needs to be the inverse of that. So we remove from the active collection and add to the inactive. So now if we rerun the tests, hopefully they'll all pass, and then we can experiment with using a dictionary instead. Oh, one failure. That's not too bad, I suppose. In memory sessions tests 138. In memory session tests 138. User 1. User 1. Let's do .NET test Crispin.tests, just so that we only run the specific test project that we care about rather than the rest tests as well. It should speed up our compilation and test run a little bit. Hooray. So get diff So let's go back to the toggle, remove the bit about groups for the time being. Format the document. Right, so git add updated only. Toggle change switching switching implementation to be user specific. Yeah. Right, now before we implement groups, because we have the potential to change things so that we have less to type, let's try doing this. We'll make this a dictionary of string boolean. We'll call it users instead of users active. Dictionary string boolean, yep, so that's fine. So now we can get rid of that and we say if users contains key user ID, return users user ID, and that'll either have true or false in it, which will be whether it's active or inactive. And if we don't contain the key, we'll return false anyway. So down here we just say users e.user equals false, and the same here except true. Let's run the tests again. Excellent. Let's add updated again. Git cm toggle refactor users active and inactive to a dictionary, which means our implementation of groups active and inactive becomes the same thing again. So that's now groups. We now need to check here, so somehow we need to figure out what the groups are for a user, and they might be in many groups, so we need to figure something out for that. But let's get rid of surplus brackets. Say if string dot is null or white space e dot group is false, groups e dot group equals false, and take that into the switch on as well, except true. Right, so we now support switching on and off for groups as well, and we now need to be able to query where our users are for groups. As we only are going to be overlooking this up for this method rather than for many methods, I think we should take it in as parameters. So like group membership, groups or membership, and we'll have some kind of methods like var groups equals, and let's call it user groups equals membership get groups for user ID. Yeah, and then we'll say something along the lines of this is where we get into that interesting problem with multiple memberships. Var I don't want to call it active groups, but I can't think of another word at the moment. Set groups, that's a bad name, is groups where, no, let's do user groups, select group, groups, no, let's start with a where instead. Where where groups contains key group, select groups G, probably to array because I think I'm going to query it many times. I will now say if set groups any so if we've got any groups, do we tend towards true or tend towards false? Honestly, I don't know. That's what unit tests are for. This is where I do test-driven development on this particular part of this method. This bit I can easily reason about in my head. That bit I know what should happen. This, however, starts to get fuzzy. So that bit's the one that I want tests on. And, you know, something that compiles as well will be useful. So it's not an event, it's not a toggle. Where does this go? I don't think we're using a control panel yet. Let's insert an interface called iGroup membership, which has an IEnumerable of string, which is get groups for string user ID. Now we should get some compile errors because we've added a parameter to our is active. But if we fake that value with substitute and always return an empty array for this getGroups call, then the actual behavior of this method shouldn't have changed. Yeah, so we're going to need to fake stuff. So membership equals substitute for iGroup membership. I think by default that will return empty anyway. We'll find out in a minute. Let's do that, that, and that. There's another one. do protected because they're all going to need this, I would imagine. iGroup membership get membership equals substitute for iGroup membership. So now we can take that. Did this inherit? No. That one. That's not a real error. Right, let's see how badly the tests fail. Nice. We diff that. CM toggle add concept of iGroup membership. Right. Now we're going to need to write a bunch of tests of this and then implement them. But I think that can be a task for tomorrow because I'm getting tired. and I need a break from raging at aspnetcore. Yeah, that didn't go quite as intended as this evening, but hey, that's development. That's what happens when I try using new frameworks that I've never tried before. Hopefully tomorrow we'll continue along the idea of user toggling for groups, or toggles for users and groups, and I will look into aspnetcore more for identity and have another go at that at some point. As always, links to GitHub and Twitter are around on my profile somewhere. They should go straight to my GitHub, and this repository is called Crispin, so take a look. If you've got any questions, email or Twitter is fine, or I guess on Twitch as well. And thanks for watching, everyone.